And I'm going to introduce Juan Carlos to you. So Juan Carlos Linares, if you don't already know him, joined Association House in January of this year as our president and CEO. He was born right here in the Humboldt Park community and raised in Bellwood. He is an attorney and has held leadership in nonprofit, government, and civic roles in a 19-year career. And he's also a part-time educator. You may have known him from his work with Lucha, ensuring affordable housing for moderate and low-income families in Westtown, Humboldt Park, and Logan Square. Juan Carlos's life experiences motivate him to lead the House in celebrating its history, fostering its growth, and serving communities towards strong, stable, and equitable futures. Juan Carlos, it's been a joy getting to know you as our new president and CEO, and I know that you've taken the time to get to know each individual employee, as well as our 30+ programs. As our first question, I'd love to know what experiences have stood out to you in your first 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you, Lillian, and the development team. I mean, I'm grateful to be here, not just here with you today, but here at Association House. It's good to see some faces that I know here. Azisti, congratulations to you as well. I know you're a brand new CEO, so congrats. Jen, it's great to see you. I know we can't hear you now, but and I might even have to call you later today, right? Because we do business together. And for everyone else here, I'm grateful to be here. And forgive my informal appearance today. We just got some brand new polo shirts from Association House, so I definitely wanted to show it off, even if it's a bit informal. But you know, I think we're all a bit informal here today, so I appreciate that. Also, you know, if I can say thanks to our board of directors, who is strong and amazing and, you know, just really dedicated to the work, including, I would say, Harriet Sadowskis, who's our previous CEO, was here for 20 years in that role and 47 years total. I mean, she's in the hallway today, so she comes in a couple times a week. She's a consultant with us. And I think it was, for me coming in here, just such a great transition and such a great idea to transition with her together. And, you know, like any couple, like we see eye to eye probably half the time, right? But I think that's the beauty of the professional relationship, is we can, you know, we hammer out the ideas and the work really well. And I'm grateful to have her here. That said, you know, I do want to acknowledge, this is tough too, but I have to bring it up. I do want to acknowledge that we're in a tough situation as a community with the violence that we have, not just here in Humboldt Park, but and in the communities here, but in Chicago, generally speaking. We had quite a bit of violence here over the weekend. And Jen, if you haven't received an email or a call, you know, we're probably going to speak later today. We had, you know, a number of shootings happen. You know, it was such a great weekend. We had a beautiful graduation for our high school, first time on site. We had Juneteenth occur, and I think something we celebrated, and we'll talk about a little bit later here. And then Father's Day, and I was appreciative of a great Father's Day as well. But we did have a number of shootings in the area, including right in front of the house. So we had a window shot out. We had someone injured, and then sadly, you know, this is tough. So I'll get emotional about it. We had a former student was killed right down the street, and so and we learned yesterday that his wife also died. You might have seen it on the news. There was video of it. It was horrific. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend that you don't. So it's kind of ugly. But this is why we're here, right? It's the beauty of Association House is we have such a passionate set of stakeholders, participants, and staff. So the joy of this is today our former students will lead a candlelight vigil here on site. And it's something that they proposed to us that we said, of course, absolutely, this is the place for that. This is a place of peace, right? Despite all of the maelstrom of violence that goes on around us, this is a place of peace. So we really appreciate the fact that you're here with us and supporting us, because we go through some tough times here, you know, and it helps to have the ears of others and the voices of others and the support. And to answer your question then, Lillian, as well, I have learned there's a ton of passion here at Association House, a lot, right? So you see here, Lillian's here, Drew's here, Trina's here from our development team. And, you know, it takes that real heart for the work, as you know, for those of you who are in this field, to really put the work forward. And really briefly, our service areas, for those that are not familiar, are in behavioral health, which I'll talk about a little later. It's our largest series of programming. Child welfare, which is, again, another tough series of tasks and work and, you know, the families that we see. But we have a really great dedicated team here. And I'll pause there with the child welfare work to note that a friend of mine, Angelique Power Williams, who's the head of the Field Foundation, is unfortunately leaving Chicago to head up a much larger foundation in Detroit that deals only with child welfare. And given that's a national organization, I'm happy to note that we're advising her on the child welfare world, right? Given that she's new to that world. So this is something we have deep expertise in. Our community health and workforce development programs, as our number 3 in no priority order, I feel is like our settlement house within the settlement house, because as you know, we are a 122-year-old settlement house. And that's the work that we really started with, helping immigrant communities, helping the marginalized low-income communities. And frankly, serving women in the community that were coming out of garment factories and wanted to upgrade their skills or wanted some other activities outside of, being on the street. And last and certainly not least, and I'll be happy to talk about this later as well, is our high school. Our high school for alternative students who are aged 16 to 21, who when we had the graduation this past Friday, it was just such a beautiful event. Despite being 94 degrees and, us baking in the sun, seeing these young people who, they really want to move their lives forward. A few of them graduated with their young babies, walking across the stage with their little caps and gowns. It was a cute ceremony. So it's work that we're really proud of, and I'm happy to talk about that as we go along.
Thank you for sharing that, Juan Carlos. I know myself, you invited me to sit in on a few of your meetings where you were getting to know individual staff. And I know one in particular that stood out to me was the meeting that we had with the integrated health team, and just seeing that team approach, because, a lot of the time when you think of your doctor's visit, right, you go into a waiting room, no one cares about you, you sit there, then 45 minutes later, you get taken back to a patient room, and maybe another 20 minutes after that, you see a doctor for 10 minutes and you're gone. And they don't think about you again for another year. And sitting with our team, you had this team of 5 people going, here's one person that we serve. How do all 5 of us work together to make sure that their needs are met? And just their level of passion that they brought to that, you use that word, I think that is endemic of everybody that works here. I wonder, you've been assessing, you spoke to the wider climate as well as our individual strengths here at Association House. What opportunities and challenges do you see as the new president and CEO?
Great question. So let me start with the challenges. So I talked about one, it's the community and the community we support. And, how we become we're already anchors in this community, but how do we become, problem solvers along with others as we're reconnecting with other partnerships in the community. I'm glad to hear that Casa Central is here with Tanya. So glad to have you here. But I'll add, so this is my second time, hopefully my last time as a CEO. And I'm grateful to have worked in these communities for the past probably decade. And it's something that's consistent across the nonprofit field, not just here in the Humboldt Park area or in the Chicago region, but really nationally, is always that lack of resources. So I think one of the opportunities that I'll share in a minute is we are really well positioned, and we're thought of very highly with our government stakeholders who, you get these large contracts for service provisions. But those government contracts don't often, and frankly, mostly don't cover the cost of the program itself. And that's where fundraising comes in. So one of the challenges really is the lack of resources and how we go about creatively growing our resources to really meet the needs of the participants in full. The other challenge is having almost 200 people on staff and another 40 to 50 contractors who are, home respite workers, or, just the number of contractors that we have. We want to do best by them. So we have so many dedicated people. We have a number of folks that have been here 40 years or more, which is rare in an organization. I would say about half of our team has been here a decade or more, which is, again, rare for an organization of our size. And then you have another set that, we get a lot of fresh new talent that comes in here and just really have their energy and ready to go. So the challenge becomes is how do we unify an approach to really welcome, respect, retain our staff? And again, this is not new to nonprofits. I experienced this in a previous position and was able to really find that we can retain folks if we put together a series of appreciations and activities, connect to partnerships as well, and have folks do more beyond their role that they want to do. And I'm really big on research and development, R&D. We're not, a research corporation, but I like to tell staff, take 5% of your time and do some R&D work, right? In whatever field that's related to your role possible, and bring that back to us and see how it is we can either enhance your role or the organization. And we won't take every idea, but at least we can listen and see where it is we're going here and work in a team collaborative approach. So the challenge becomes an opportunity there. And that relates to really the greatest opportunity is I have seen in my short time here, but again, in my decade working in the community and my 19 years as a lawyer and as a community servant here, Association House truly is, I think, best in class in terms of service operations. We have such tremendously great managers and leaders on staff here that have been here for a long time. As I mentioned, our internal controls are without doubt, I'm having an internal controls meeting today, in fact, with our process quality management team, just to make sure that we're on task for our strategic planning, to make sure that we're complying well with our state and federal and city grants. I don't lose any sleep over our operations and our best practices. I come here very lucky to have that in place. And so the challenge with that then becomes is constantly improving because we can always do better, right? And so there's always that marginal improvement that we can make it, and it's really identifying what that is. But I have to say, Lillian, to your question, one of the greatest opportunities that we have now in society is the movement for mental health. And so show of hands here for those who have their video cameras on, who saw the PBS special last night on mental health? Did anyone see that? Yeah, a few of you, right? I feel like, and they rerun it a couple times, during the week. So if you check out the listings, you'll probably be able to see it on Saturday or Sunday. But I don't come in as a mental health expert, but I do know that there was a need given my previous experiences. And I'm happy to have a number of mental health experts here on the team. But just I have a lot of pride seeing on PBS, for example, how they displayed it for the world from a very mainstream point of view, really what that stigma is with regards to mental health and how we can better provide services in that world. So it's kind of a lifting up of all boats in our service area to show that, it's not just Association House or Casa Central for that matter that's doing this work and we're kind of struggling alone here. There's now a movement here that can help us with resources, with people maybe going to school, choosing this as a field and as a passion for their careers. And I'm just really happy to see that there's a movement there.
Thank you for all of those thoughts, Juan Carlos, especially with research and development and that human capital. I mean, this year challenged that. And we got a lot of questions in the registration about how we emerge from COVID-19. So the question will be, what do you see as the post-COVID-19 impact on the Association House and maybe on our wider nonprofit community?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got here, when I interviewed here actually last year, that was both my question as well. How's the organization prepping for this, and what are the things we're doing? But then also putting myself forward in my experience in really crisis management is a lot of what this is as well. I was happy to see that Association House was among the first of its peers to go remote learning, to go telehealth, teletherapy. These are not easy things to do. But as we come out of COVID, I will say that our team was amazing also in my first week here. I think the first thing I wanted to do was let's get everyone vaccinated, right? So the vaccine was brand new. I think it had been rolled out 2 weeks before. I started on January 1st. And so I was really happy to see the team was motivated here to get that done. And all it took really was us qualifying ourselves. If you recall, there was the Tier 1A, the Tier 1B, Tier 1C, that went on from December through February. And I looked at, who we were, the work that we were doing, all of our paperwork, our charter even. And I felt like we're Tier 1A, like a hospital. We're not a hospital, but we do that kind of work. We are essential workers. We have therapists on the team. We have educators on the team. So in a sense, we qualified ourselves as 1A, and Rush Hospital agreed with us. If you recall, back in January, there was this big rush. Everyone wanted to get the vaccine. It was limited supply. But we were one of those few early in our peer group of settlement houses, of social service providers, to go ahead and get vaccinated. And at the time when we did a survey on the team, we saw that it was about 110 of our, at the time, 184 staff that wanted to get the vaccine or has signed up for their vaccine already, or who had already gotten the shot. So we see now that with the survey results we've gotten, that about at least two thirds of our staff is now fully vaccinated. And we think about 70 to 75% have been vaccinated, but we just haven't gotten all the results back from our surveys yet. And so if you see, that really tracks with society in general, right? Those numbers show that about a third of society wanted to get the vaccine right away, right? And so we saw that really tracked with our experience here. Another third was hesitant, but wanted to kind of wait maybe a few weeks and see how others experienced it. And so we did our education in-house, and I'm happy to see that some of our directors sent email blasts to all staff showing pictures of themselves getting vaccinated. I did that over my LinkedIn and my Facebook. So you had another third over that monthly period that, also went and got vaccinated. But then you had that other third that's still a bit hesitant. We were able to do that education, get a few of those to get vaccinated, but there are some that just won't. And we respect that. But that plays into, Lillian, your question, how we come back from our protocols, given that we have a critical mass of folks. And yes, we even drove some of our participants to go get vaccinated at Rush and at Humboldt Park Health, formerly known as Norwegian American Hospital. So to conclude these comments on how we come back, some of our participants, particularly in our life skills education program, these are developmentally and intellectually disabled adults who come in. It's, we wish we could see hundreds of people every day, but we can only see, the 2 to 3 dozen that we see every day. They had to have face-to-face services. Not every one of them could do remote learning or telehealth or teletherapy. So it was a risk. We had some of our case managers going out there to the 2 residences that we have, just like the Casa Central has its Posada. We have a couple of residential facilities as well. And we had to go there every day. We have people working 24/7 there. And so it was a risk for us in making sure that everyone was working to the safest ability possible. We did have some infections, I have to admit, right? We did have some COVID infections. Thankfully, no deaths on staff, but we did see some deaths through our participants, which, it hurt us, right? Emotionally and, just as an organization. But I'm happy to see that those were the first participants that we drove physically to go get vaccinated. Was our life skills education programming. They were back here at the house in March, and I was happy to see them doing Zumba, down on the first floor, and then doing their remote learning on their tablets and just, saying hello to each other. Because as you know, it's not just COVID, it's the mental health issues of isolation, anxiety, and depression that we were also working with. But given our wraparound services that we have here, I think we did the best that we could. And are happy to see lots of the programs returning now, such that, of course, the school will return in full in the fall, and we'll probably have in full services back here at the house in the fall as well. So to answer your question, it was tough for a lot of groups, but we were able to manage it really well. I'm just proud of that.
I would have to agree, as I think you spoke in your introduction about the high school graduation. And we had almost as many graduates this year as we would in a non-pandemic year. And of course, that happened the same week that we're seeing reports out of CPS that wasn't the case in most schools. And I think that speaks to our service model being one that is able to support people. We were already going above and beyond to support our participants, and that didn't change during the pandemic and won't change afterward. One of the, I think, most interesting questions that came in was about how Association House will respond to the calls in our larger society for anti-racism and social justice work. Can you speak to that for a little bit?
Yeah, and so we went through COVID last year, and I think one of the great things of society was we went through this awakening, and racial reckoning in the country as a whole, and absolutely here in the Chicago region for sure. Association House, I think, was ready for this in terms of how it was, knowing that we had to do better in terms of awareness, education, programming, cultural enhancement, and so on and so forth. And so one of the things that I was proud to see walking in here is that our high school already had, as a department, an anti-racism committee. And so I'm happy and grateful that they invited me to be a part of that committee. So they've met every Tuesday for the past, since, they themselves since October, I think, and I've been meeting with them regularly, not every week, because scheduling is always the hardest thing for me, and time management, of course, but meeting for about 3/4 of the time that they meet. And two of the great things that have come out of this is really a recalibration of the curriculum itself to better reflect the populations we serve. And I think that's a strength. And in fact, one of the teachers asked me, as the students were coming back, and I walked in to say hi to the students, and we were just all happy to see students back through hybrid learning. And one of the teachers asked me point blank, like, "Hey, Juan Carlos, so tell us a book that you've recently read that you could recommend for, anti-racism or restorative justice." And I had just read, it was James Baldwin's, and I'm forgetting the title here, but The Fire Inside. That's generally the title. And it's something I've wanted to read for like 25 years, right, since I was in college. And it was just such a intellectually like enlightening read on not just his personal experience, James Baldwin, the writer from the mid-20th century, but just it speaks to today totally. And one of the comments that I gave, one of the quotes of the book in that class was James Baldwin mentioned, they might have the law on their side, they might have law enforcement on their side, and they might have what they call justice on their side. But he was really quoting Cicero from ancient Rome, saying, "But when a law is unjust, it's no real law at all. We have to change that." And I think that was really inspiring for the students that were in the room to hear, because they have the power, to be lawmakers one day, or to change laws, or to advocate on behalf of their households or their communities. And so that's a part of the change that's coming through that anti-racism community in the high school. The other thing that I'll bring up is, I'm personally in the process of engaging a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant to help us on a journey of assessing how we're doing here. And I've heard time and again that we can do better. And I think we can, in terms of assessing how we are as a culture and representing, in particular, our African-American staff and our participants. But I'll go farther and say even our transgender community, of which we have here on staff and in our participant base. We don't speak at all about our Native American communities, which they have told us feel invisible in Chicago, even though there's 60,000 Native Americans, on the north side of Chicago, and just so many other celebrations that we can do. But I want to reflect too on some of the partnerships we have here. In fact, we are very closely linked with our lending institutions, our banking partners, particularly in our workforce development world. They also see this call for racial justice and greater diversity and inclusion. And so one of the things that they've told us is they want to hire more from our community. So this is something that we're re-reflecting with each other, is how do we do better cultural competence with our clients and our participants? How do we do better community competence? And what that means is, for example, if you have branches in the banking industry, which I've worked with for many, many years as an attorney, and you have maybe a quarter to half of your folks are Spanish speaking only, or whatever that language is, the staff should reflect that as well. And the training should also reflect that. So I'm happy to see that our workforce development, particularly our BankWorks training, reflects that participant base. But it's also community based. So if we're having folks that have our banks that have branches in Inglewood or West Garfield Park or in the Austin communities, those are largely predominantly African-American communities. We want to be able to recruit those talents too to be in our workforce development training, which I'm happy to say that we do. And those folks, even if they don't have a language competence in a different language, they definitely have a community competence in terms of the people that they're serving. And so we're working more closely with the different banks that both support our BankWorks program, but also want to be a part of our BankWorks, to know that it's not just training on the components of banking and financial literacy. It's also the people that are coming to us and coming to you that we want to elevate for these roles, not just as tellers in the branches, but hopefully in leadership roles later on. And one of the things that I've heard is that as folks go to the different branches here that we work with, and we talk about, hey, we train for BankWorks, we'll have a teller turn around or a branch assistant manager turn around and say, hey, I went through Association House and I went through BankWorks and I'm here because of that, right? And so it really shows a reflection, a direct reflection in the community in terms of how we're serving each other in the lending industry. I did see a question from Azisti talking a little bit more, if I can pull it up here, about the DEI work. So this is a journey. One of the things that I heard, I'll say it from a process standpoint. One of the things that I heard, and one of the toughest time management things I was able to do in my first month and a half here, was have meetings with every single staff person here. Again, almost 200 people, and just lining up schedules was really the toughest part of that. But in addition to wanting to be better in terms of our DEI work, generally speaking, one of the things I heard specifically was, we don't want top-down solutions from me, right, from Association House. And so I have to respect that and reflect that in the way I make decisions and roll out protocols. And so what I'd like to do then is, and we're working on this right now, is again, I'm vetting some consultants that will come in and do an assessment with us, but we'll also be recruiting literally in the next week. I'm going to put out a draft charter for us to create a whole new DEI committee on staff here. And we have to have folks from every single department, from administration at every level. It has to look as diverse as the staff does, so that we are collectively coming to decisions on how we assess ourselves. Well, first of all, who we bring on as consultants, how we assess ourselves, what's the next step in that journey? Is it implementation or is it further assessment? Once we implement, we evaluate ourselves, and how we've done that. And so as this is to your question, perhaps others are thinking is, what does that mean? Let's be more specific. I want for the community to tell us what that is, right? And so I'll be happy to report once we get to that point in the next couple months here. But in terms of a timeline, we definitely want to start in July of this year, signing a contract with someone, having a committee in place, and then moving forward to a second half of this calendar year assessment with consultants. And I'll talk about this in a moment before I pass it back to Lillian, but I'll talk about strategic planning. This will go hand in hand with our strategic planning, where before we even move forward with a strategic planning, we want to have a lens with racial equity, with LGBTQIA+ equity, and we want to bring that lens to our strategic planning before we even start that process. And our strategic planning consultant fully agrees that that's a process that she wants to see in place too before we move forward. So I hope that answers the question.
I see a thumbs up. And I think a lot of our DI work, Juan Carlos, you and I spoke to this, is really taking that honest assessment of where we are, but where we are, this might be one of our strengths, and it's how do we look critically at it and continue to improve and make sure that we're also being a leader in the community in the way that we were around getting our staff vaccinated early on. I'm going to give you one last question that came in ahead of time, and then we're going to just open it up for our last 20 minutes or so to anybody in the audience to ask follow-up questions, to ask questions that occurred to you, or to even share how what Juan Carlos has shared is resonating with you as a donor, supporter, community member. But the last question is, of course, about strategic planning. So as president and CEO, what do you hope to accomplish within the next year, 3 years, 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to give credit again to the program teams, because we've talked a lot about like upper level ideas, high level ideas. The day-to-day here is amazing. I check in with Julie, who's our amazing vice president here, and a number of our staff directors. I'll walk, up and down the different floors on a given day and just see the different operations going forward. So I do want to give credit, even though we're kind of talking high level today, that there's a number of detailed tasks and client, services going on every single day here. And so part of, part of my role here will be assessing, how can we do a little bit better? How can I support our staff a little bit better every single day, every single year? And that's a journey, right? So that's a series of outcomes that we want to see once we've evaluated where we're at. Let's do it again and see where we're at, because our participants really rely on us to be here. And the one thing I'll mention from a prior question with regards to COVID is, I'm also happy to see we never closed our doors. So even though we didn't have, folks coming into the building, we were going out to them, and we were in a sense always open, and we had to be, because our communities have relied on us for 122 years, including in the year 2020, including in the year 2021, and moving forward. But I did mention strategic planning. So from a high level, our strategic plan has been extended for this year to give me a little time to assess and to learn and to, get to know folks. My favorite part of strategic planning, when you have that 3 to 5 year plan, is of course we're going to have, those components of how do we improve our operations, how do we envision ourselves, what's our mission and vision. I'll be happy to see, if we keep our current mission or if folks want to change it and enhance it. But my favorite part of strategic planning is putting together our core values. Those 3 to 6 statements that really represent who we are. And I will reach back to a previous set of core statements, of core values that I put together in another organization. And one that, I'd like to in some form institute here that I think staff would agree to is, and I would take this with me everywhere. It was, we are we are in service to our communities and are transformed by that service, or, we are transformed by our service to our communities. And that's a very internal focused, core value. It's, we do this work because we love it. And, literally every single day I'm inspired. We grieve with each other every day, on certain circumstances. We come together, we brainstorm so well, and we just meet the challenges together, so that this is really a calling, right? This work is really a calling. So the core values are my favorite part of that. And so I'll be happy to see how we roll this out together. Again, getting input from almost 200 staff. And I would even like to go further to our 40 to 50 contractors that we have, our home respite workers, folks that I don't see every day, but that are working in people's homes, in the communities every single day, to get that feedback to see who it is we are for the next 3 to 5 years. The second of 3 things that I'll mention is strategic growth. So I have to give Harriet a ton of credit. I mean, she moved us from a location at 2150 North Avenue, which when I started working, even in previous jobs here in the greater Humboldt Park community, I would drive past 2150 West North Avenue every day and just see, some beautiful condos that are there. But I did not know that we were there for 100 years almost, right? Serving those communities. That's where we started, on the corners of North Damon and Milwaukee Avenue, serving Lithuanian, Jewish, Polish immigrants, that community. As time went on, serving, yes, a growing Eastern European community, particularly the Polish community. And then that transitioning over to new Mexican immigrants, Puerto Rican communities, African American communities, and just seeing that evolution, and just really seeing here just the insightful evolution of who it is we serve on an everyday basis here. And the growth that happened, particularly during Harriet's tenure, is one that was like expansive growth. And then we have to be measured now in how we grow, because we have this building that we support, which is a former hospital building. I've been told by community members here who are also leaders in the community that they were born here at what used to be Walther Memorial Hospital. I was born right across the park at Norwegian American Hospital, now Humboldt Park Health. So these are institutions that, as we think about the history, we leverage that for our future. So I'll have more details perhaps on another meet and greet as we talk about how we grow, but I do see in particular in our behavioral health department fully taking advantage of that movement for mental health and moving beyond the Medicaid services that we do. Of course, we will probably always during my tenure see Medicaid patients, because those are the hardest hit and the hardest to reach often, and they rely on us. But how do we move forward to seeing people with PPO coverage or HMO coverage that are also in our communities that also want for us to serve them, right? We should be here for them as well. And that's a real opportunity for growth for us. And also the workforce development team is, again, we started with that 122 years ago. I'm happy to see we continue that. It is, as I said, the settlement house within the settlement house, but it's also the hardest to grow because that's where the resources are the least forthcoming from either government or for donors. But that's where folks like you come in, is if I have any ask here, it's just that is, I appreciate the donations each of you have made. We're very appreciative of that, of course. But it's really growing our network. I've been, one of the funnest parts of my job is having lunches or Zoom calls. I'll have have a lunch and a Zoom call later today with community partners on, reintroducing ourselves, who we are, how can we work together? Can we collaborate on grants together or philanthropic donations? How can we tap into each other's donor base who might, that donor, I know in the industry we think about cannibalizing donors and that sort of thing. I think there's room for all of us to grow together. And that's the biggest opportunity for growth. So I'm happy to see partners here on the call with us. And really that's my ask, is just help us grow our partnerships, help us grow our stakeholder base, and just introduce us to others as well who might be interested in the really important work that we do.
Juan Carlos, thank you so much for answering all those questions that were submitted in advance. As I said, at this point, we would love to open it up. We have until noon, and then we'll make sure everybody gets back to their day. If you do need to sign off early, feel free. But I'd invite you to ask follow-up questions or share how something that you've heard today speaks to you.
If I may begin, I just wanted to say that I was born at Walter Memorial Hospital. Woohoo! So thank you for that plug, Juan Carlos. And thank you so much for speaking so edifyingly about everything and bringing about just issues that we really need to get to the core of. And I thank you for the opportunity here. I wanted to say that on a personal level, Association House is close to my heart. My uncle, when he was alive, he worked closely with Association House. He worked there, then he worked with DCFS. I've been a part of a lot of the things, or better said, I've known about a lot of things that association has done throughout the years. So you guys are veterans. I thank you for being now a part of our community. I love how we need to come together. It takes a village. So we need to come together and help our community straighten, because it is ridiculous. Getting back to what Juan Carlos began with, what happened over the weekend in Humboldt Park with our families. I have family that live in Humboldt Park. There's many individuals that connect me to the individuals that were killed in the way that they were. We need to come together and bring about healing and let them know that there is a light still come. We're here to help. I want to just say also that Association House has helped Casa Central, La Posada specifically. A lot of our participants have been a part of your programs. And most recently, one of our participants graduated. So I was really, he was so excited. I mean, so excited. And how we work together without realizing that is that then I gave him a little graduation bag, gave him a bunch of stuff to celebrate. And I said, I'm coming together because you did it. It took this community to help you. And, you know, it's so fulfilling to see that come back at you with a smile, or someone who doesn't say many words, but says a sentence about it. So it was an amazing experience. And if I may just ask a quick question, during the pandemic, I know that you guys have your high school program. During the pandemic, what were your challenges with working with the youth, and how has that changed now that we're transitioning? What has been your success and your challenges? Because I know that we've experienced them a lot as well. So if I may ask that question, I appreciate. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Tanya. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. I mean, I might be in the room where you were born. I don't know. I mean, there's so many former hospital rooms here, but your story is one that I'm so happy to hear, and it, you know, we share it, right, with others that work in this community, or others who have physically left the community but come back for other reasons, you know, either to celebrate community or to help us as supporters. All that said, and I'm sorry to hear, if I heard correctly, that your son did pass. I'm sorry to hear that. And to your point on the, you know, the violence in the community, you know, so, and you know this, so like, we didn't cause it, we didn't create it, but it is here, and we are here to serve folks, because oftentimes, so you have the side of the folks who are being affected by crime and violence. And of course, Casa Central is a community servant doing that work. We are a community servant doing that work. But, you know, I have to share with you before I get to the high school piece, and I think it's related, in fact. So I went to Proviso West High School because I grew up in Bellwood, though I was born in this community. And I grew up, you know, in an immigrant circumstance where I stood in line at the food pantry out in Melrose Park. My parents learned English not at Association House, but at Nuevos Horizontes, which is part of Triton College at the time. So we are, in a sense, veteran users of settlement house services, right? And so this is why I just feel so connected to this work. But to your point, you know, I grew up with some friends who are just no longer here. They're dead, you know, or they're in jail. And I could have been that person, right? I mean, I was super lucky that my parents were really tough on me in terms of education, that my neighbors were like grandparents to me and made sure that, you know, if I was out on the block with my friends, that they were watching us. So I was really lucky. And so you need, I mean, Hillary Clinton said this, and she uses the old African proverb, it takes a village. It really does. And we are part of that. We're an important part of that village. So even if we are, you know, devastated at the crime and violence, even those perpetrators of violence, I think, to not become perpetrators, need us to be here, need us to grow our services, and need us to serve them. And so this is where it's hard. It is hard because, you know, not everyone wants to be reached right away. So that's where it takes, you know, great outreach services. And this is related to the high school because you asked about the challenges. It was a very similar challenge in that we already have challenges when we're in person, having young people come to school on a daily basis, because many of them have their own families now. Many of them work full time, right? Many of them have some other emotional or mental health issues that they are, you know, seeking services for, trying to overcome, but it prevents them from coming day to day. So for the young man who passed, actually his story is a typical story of someone, he did not graduate. He was here 3 years, worked really, really hard, I'm told, you know, by the staff that knew him. But he just aged out. He was 21. He was really close to graduating, but just couldn't make it. My hope is that he did get his GED later, but either way, he was here with us. And so as we went into COVID, COVID just really exacerbated that. People who needed the face-to-face time were not able to receive that. And the result of that is when we have a graduating class every year of about 45 to 50 people, this year was about 35 to 40 people. So we did lose a few numbers from our typical graduation of folks that just couldn't make it. But the opposite is also true. People who prefer to be online or who worked, maybe odd hours, were able to join us through remote learning. So we were able to capture a different set of folks. And I think one of the things I didn't mention, and I want to here, is the opportunity coming out of COVID is how do we permanently deliver hybrid services to folks that probably could benefit from that, right? So this has been a learning opportunity for us to perhaps enhance our services through hybrid learning, hybrid telehealth, and so on. The last thing I'll say, because I know that was a long answer, is Tanya, I'm happy to have you here and others as well who are our partners, because Casa Central is also an anchor. Humboldt Park Health is also an anchor. I would even go farther out on Division. Puerto Rican Cultural Center is an anchor. We are very, very lucky in this community in the greater Humboldt Park region, which includes Logan Square, Avondale, going east to West Town, to have so many social service providers. And I think our collective aim should be to work a little closer together. And that's not on you, Tanya, that's on me and, your CEO and everyone else. And I see some movement there, and I'm really happy for the future to see what that holds. But the challenge is also true in that, our friends in West Garfield Park, in the Austin community, the North Lawndale community, they have a few anchors, but they're not as densely populated with social service providers. So our challenge, always invite those residents to come see our services. We have a number of people that come from Austin and West Garfield Park as participants into our services. But then the challenge becomes, how do we come to them, right? How do we better go to those communities or help out those struggling nonprofits there and lend a hand for them to have stronger infrastructure, for them to also get funding, and for us to help them. And so we don't see each other as competitive, because we're all, we all have the same mission here, is really to better our communities and the households we serve. So those are things that are on my mind as I answer your question, Tanya. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much.
Karen? You're on mute, by the way. Karen, you're on mute.
Goes back to the same questions I was asking years ago about growing your board, about the young leadership piece, and expanding a donor base. So what are some of your thoughts off the cuff?
Great question. I appreciate that. And I should have given more thoughts to the board earlier. I had some talking points, but I kind of went over. I went over them. I didn't mean to. So thank you for the question. I have to say, so I am surprised at how strong and dedicated this board is. I don't know why I'm surprised. I should have imagined that coming in here, but they have real strengths in governance, and I really appreciate that. We have some great committees in place, and this is new for me. We have a couple board members who I really appreciate, who have been there, 30 and even 50 years in some cases, in one case in particular. And my job, I would say, in the first 3 months was to get to know each one as individuals and see how they came to the house and what they would like to see in its evolution as individuals, and then come back to collective to have those conversations. One of the things that I heard early on, even in my interviews, is they would like to see greater diversification amongst themselves as a board of directors. So I'm happy to report that even this Friday coming up, we are recruiting 2 new board members who are diverse community members, but really solid, more than that, really solid leaders in the community also. And there potentially is a 3rd new board member coming on who, yes, comes from a diverse community and is also a solid leader in his large corporation. So diversifying ourselves is one area. The other area is, I am super appreciative to have Lillian here, to have Trina here, to have Drew. Our development team went from, they were also kind of going in transition to now is, one of our stronger teams here on staff, and is really doing a better job than perhaps we've done in the last few years in terms of telling our story and getting the board involved in helping identify what those stories are with the board. So for example, we just had our first virtual gala, and I was just so impressed, and I give Lillian and Drew here a lot of credit, and Trina is brand new and on her first day was already working on the gala. And I have to say, I was so impressed with the stories we were telling, particularly of our participant Jose, who is one of our life skills education participants, and his story. celebrating Harriet as well. And, you know, I learned quite a bit from that story that we were able to film and share with everyone. And the board, our special events committee on the board, really led the way on this. And I was really proud and happy and kind of relieved to see that, to be honest, because as a brand new CEO, you know, I felt a lot of pressure on my shoulders in terms of how much are we going to raise, how many people we're going to have here. The final report on the numbers was we had 174 people tune in for a virtual gala. I thought that was great, which is more than I think our last in-person gala. And we were able to raise, I think we grossed $125,000, which exceeded my expectations. So we kept raising the bar. Of course, we always want to do better. But I think that was, Karen, to your question, a new benchmark for us in terms of how we raise funds and how we get our board involved, including committee members who are not members of the board. And Drew is working on this in terms of our auxiliary board and how we, you know, and this is a challenge for me, I'll admit, how we reconnect our auxiliary board with our board of directors, because that is a true pipeline to our board of directors and folks with a lot of energy who have already participated in some activities here at the House. At the end of the day, though, I would love for us to really, and we have a great board chair, Tad Ingalls. I speak with him every single week, multiple times a week, particularly in crisis situations, but also just general governance. And I would love that continuity of just having strong board chair, someone who's really committed and dedicated to the work we do, and helping us not just grow the number of board members and the diversity there, but their connection and continuity. Again, having a 50-year board member, I would love for my long tenure here to see that as well, that we have some folks that stay very long-term, and that those that don't keep their organizations and their law firms and their banks and their corporations involved with their board memberships as well. So I hope that answered your question, Karen.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Other comments, perhaps?
We have a chat.
I'll give you a freebie as a consultant. You know, consultants just tell you what to do. They don't do it. And so that's the danger. And those of us that have been in the field a long time and work as consultants and are brought in and come up with, you know, all kinds of, you know, plans and paper and charts or whatever, and then they walk away. So you have to be prepared to pull out what you really want to do and what you're going to do almost before they walk in the doors. Otherwise, you're getting lots of new lingo and lots of new paper and lots of new charts. So that's my freebie for today.
I appreciate the freebie and the softball, Karen. In fact, I'll you know, tag team with you on that comment. In that, absolutely, and that's a great reminder, by the way, too, in terms of how we look at bringing on consultants, right? I will add to from the previous comment in terms of this is why I would love to have a DEI committee on staff here. I didn't mention that we already have 6 internal committees. I'll just name 2 of them. One of them is our Human Resources Committee. And so we have reactivated some of the programming of that committee to do cool appreciation things over the summer. I mean, I have my new polo on today, so it's something that we're doing for all staff. So in addition to the tchotchkes and the shirts and the jackets that we're ordering for all teams, we're having an ice cream social. We'd love to have a barbecue either on site or right across the street at the park. Just a way to celebrate folks through a committee structure. And these aren't my ideas, right? These are the committee's ideas. The other is, so I mentioned human resources. The other is a human rights committee, which is really like an ombudsman for participants who might have some grievances, which, you know, in any nonprofit you'll have. But I'm proud, use that word again, to see that we actually address those through a committee structure to evaluate what are some circumstances, how can we improve ourselves, or how can we better address whatever those participant needs are. So as we add a DEI committee, maybe this goes a little bit into my own leadership philosophy, is what I've learned, again, this is my second go around and hopefully my last as a CEO, is in addition to having that, you know, that on paper, I am definitely the executive of the organization and I make decisions and, you know, there's an authority there that's there for sure. And people respect it and I'm happy to see that. But I'm also a peer, right? So I love it when people just pop into my office and say hello, or I'll pop into people's offices every single day or down to the reception desks just to chat. I'm also a peer. So when it comes time to, again, receiving a DEI consultant, I don't want to be the one to make, so I will make the final decision, of course, in the call on, signing off on what we're doing here. But I don't want to be the one to lead a brainstorming session. I want to hear what others have to say. And we have so much talent on staff that I would be remiss if I'm the one, like here, I'm doing all the talking, it's a meet and greet, but in a session like that, I like to sit back, see where the talent is on the team, hear where their thoughts are. And yeah, let's bring that all together, and then put something on paper and roll out, a charter for ourselves. So that goes to your point on the consultants. Absolutely, I will keep that in mind. But I also look forward to seeing what our team has to say in terms of those components that we pull out and how we operate that.
Good.
As we near the end of our time here today, I just want to again thank each of you for being with us, for your financial support, and for your advocacy on our behalf in the community, for, as Juan Carlos said, connecting us to new networks, to new people as we continue to grow. And thank you as well for your insights, your thoughts. We, of course, invite you anytime to move out of the virtual space and come for a tour, come see what we're doing in person. We'd love to see you. But again, thank you. And also let us know what other virtual events you might like to see. I know we have a variety of people on staff that are eager to speak to the issues in our community, and we'd be happy to put more virtual events together. So let us know if you're interested. And again, thank you all.